I'm Isabelle Gonthier, Chief Assessment Officer at PSI Services, and I invite you to delve deep into the world of testing with me. Every episode, I'll be on the virtual couch with experts from the testing industry, engaging in conversations about the latest developments in our field. Your quest for testing knowledge starts here. Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the PSI Tried and Tested podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of meeting with Ada Wu. She's the VP of Innovative Learning and Assessment Solutions at Ascend Learning. And we're going to be talking about the evolving role of psychometricians in the age of tech and AI. And I'm excited because we're here in Berlin at the E-ATP Conference. So I think it's timely because there's lots of conversations around that. So welcome to our podcast, Ada.
Thank you, Isabelle. It's a pleasure seeing you today.
Yeah, absolutely. In this beautiful Berlin.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Ada, we always start our podcast with learning a little bit more about our guests' background. So, how did you get involved in assessment? Like, what's your story?
Yeah. So, as your introduction is probably the tip off that I am a psychometrician by training. When I started going to university, my plan was to be a clinical psychologist. So I was going through the clinical psychology route. As I went deeper into my training, I realized that it's not a path for me. That's not where my passion is. In my master's program, my thesis study was to look at test anxiety and how to find ways to help people with test anxiety. Through that research, I have to look at a lot of assessment and clinical inventory for anxiety. And then I started to see there's some varying level of qualities in the assessments. Some I thought were very good, some were questionable. So I kind of start looking into who made these assessments, how are these assessments made? And then I figure out that there is a job called a psychometrician. And there are people that, their whole job is to make tests. And I thought, wow, fascinating. And that was 2001, I believe. It was the first time that I heard the term psychometrics. And then as I went further in my PhD study, I became very interested in the psychometric role, and I took many classes, and I happened to do well in those classes. And then I kind of went that route. And what attracted me to psychometric is that it served my original goal to help people, but it's not in a clinical setting. Mm-hmm. I can work behind the scene and make an impact in people's life, which I love.
Yeah, no, I think and that's exactly why it's super interesting to hear more about the backstories, because that connection in terms of where you started, what you wanted to do more as a clinical psychometrician, not clinical psychometrician, clinical psychologist, I should say, and the evolution of that. And still the connection is there. Even if you're not doing clinical psychology, you have the connection around how you can help people in a way through assessment. And it's funny because we've known each other for a long time. And I also started wanting to be a clinical psychologist. So it's funny, it's a similar process for me. I was just like, I don't think it's for me. I thought it was, but I don't think it is. So definitely our gain in terms of having you as part of the assessment community.
Yeah. Sure. And I think, like you also, since we've known each other for a long time, you also knew a little bit of my backstory, that I am a first generation college student. And there are a few tests that are pivotal in my life. I took the TOEFL, I took the SAT, I took the GRE, and each of those tests got me entrance into academic program, got me scholarship opportunities. So I saw early on what these big assessment can do for people and open doors. So when I figured out that there's a job for it, I was all in.
Yeah, the impact of assessment here in your situation. And I think that it speaks volume, and you were able to share your story. I remember as the chair of the ATP conference a few years ago, and it was very impactful, I know, for attendees to hear that more. So thanks for sharing, because I think that's an important element around, yes, the background on how you got into testing and psychometrics and assessment, but also the impact it had on you. So I think that, as we think about your evolution in the assessment industry, in the assessment world, you're obviously someone that has lots of expertise, experience. You evolved in your role, starting as a psychometrician and now being in a leadership level as a vice president. So I think I'm interested in hearing more from your perspective. How do you think psychometricians need to really consider those commercial business operation factors in their roles? Because, it's one thing to be like a psychometrician with all of the technical expertise, the deeply rooted analytics and all of that, but being able to sort of like look at it more from a business and commercial standpoint. I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on that, considering your role.
Yeah. So as I prepare for this podcast and this interview, I was kind of reflecting on my career journey, how much I have changed since I got out of my graduate training and, what have I learned along the way. So depending on where you go to school, you probably have a preference on like what equating method you want to use or what standard setting method you want to use. You're taught that there are ways that do these things like well and technically sound, et cetera, et cetera. What I've learned in, almost the past two decades is every test is not the same. There are considerations maybe a little bit beyond just the psychometric rigor and quality that one should consider. Like you said, commercial and customer impact and things like that. Using my job now as an example, maybe I need to kind of step back and talk a little bit about Ascend Learning. So Ascend Learning is a company that focus on education and workforce development, particularly in the healthcare sector. So we primarily serve three sectors in the healthcare sector: allied health, nursing from undergraduate to graduate nursing, and medical. And through that is we also serve the provider workforce space. So if you think about all our different brands that have different target in mind, different stakeholders, for our allied health exam, many of them are certification exams. So we are the organization that grant the certification. Yeah. And then for our nursing brand, our ATI nursing education program, it is to help nursing students prepare for their board exam, prepare them to be clinical ready nurses. And then we have our medical segment is, we prepare folks for a variety of medical subspecialty in the United States. So depending on which brand I'm working on and the purpose of the exam, that what I would like to do in the psychometric aspect might be different. For example, in our allied health certification program, we care about people that are competent and safe at the entry level. So all our tests are made to have an accurate pass-fail decision. It's pass-fail exam. You're either competent or not competent in the certification program. For our nursing program, so nursing program can span anywhere from 18 months to 4 years, depending on the type and level of the program. What our customers and our students care about is we teach them something along the way, something that maybe we give them predictive assessment along the way to help them remediate, spot early warning signs that this student might be in trouble. How likely is she to be ready to take their board exam? So the predictiveness of all the exams along the way might be important. So just these two brands, you can see from a psychometric perspective, what, your decision might be different. How you make the test, how you handle the items, how many items you need in your item inventory, what type, because there might be various stakes. So all of these, I think, with your end customer in mind, you need to put that into consideration. What are you doing for your customers? Are you helping them solve a problem? Or, you're just trying to minimize your standard error, get it as accurate as possible on everything. It's like, well, that might not be something that the customer would care or need.
Yeah, it's all about the purpose of the assessment and the audience and the target, the target population for that linked back to the purpose, which is an important element because, again, to your point, the way the assessment is going to be designed, the type of questions, everything, the backbones behind it, like the processes are very similar, but again, you need to align that to the purpose. You don't need the same types of assessments, with your example, to make certification high stake decisions versus like a tool that's going to help progress and assess where you're at in your learning stages, basically.
Yeah, and from a business perspective too, I think it's also important to see, your business aspect of the type of program.
Yeah.
So, if you are the market leader of one segment, like our ATI nursing education, we're the market leader. We are in over 60% of US nursing school. That's a very different proposition of what type of content your customer expects you to offer, the type of quality, the type of variety. But if we say we're building up a new program, that we're the new entrant, then, what are the core value prop that you're offering your customer? And what are those things that you need to focus on, And I think all of those will be important for a psychometrician to consider as they are, creating content, both in learning and assessment.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point. And sometimes, I think it gets forgotten a little bit that it's way more than the pure analytics and all of that. There's so many different components. So I appreciate that. And now a short break. Hello, tried and tested listeners and fellow testing enthusiasts. I'm Isabelle Gonthier, your guide through the fascinating world of credentialing. Each week, we dive deep with expert guests to explore the hottest topics in certification and licensure testing. If you're enjoying our journey through lifelong learning and innovation, take a moment to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you know someone passionate about testing or curious about the latest testing trends, why not share this podcast with them? It might just be the inspiration they need. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our community. Remember, sharing knowledge is one of the best ways to grow our industry together. Keep listening. So as we sort of think about, again, the role of the psychometricians from a business standpoint, from what we're trying to accomplish for the stakes of the assessments, I think, when we think about technology, when we think about the investment of AI, how do you see psychometricians needing to adapt their skill to really remain effective in their roles?
Yeah, I think with psychometricians or, any subject matter expert human workers, what I'll focus on is the human skills that are unique to humans. Like AI can't do those things well yet. Some of it might be creativity, problem solving, making, critical thinking through decisions critically, having empathy, communication, being able to influence. Those are not the kind of things that AI can do today. And in the foreseeable future, I don't think that will be something that AI can do well. So I think those are the kinds of things that, as one progresses in their career, that might be something to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's important because again, it's a bit of a shift in a way. It's kind of looking at leveraging what AI can do well and how it can help enhance, improve, and make all of us more efficient, more productive, and the economy of scale in a way. But the flip side of it is that then, while you're kind of having that taking care of some of the tasks and the leveraging it as a tool to help with developing questions, with looking at some, the way to leverage it for feedback, providing and all that, then shifting the focus of those psychometricians on the other elements that, AI, to your point, doesn't necessarily do well, and it's not there yet. So I think that, when you think about, that's a nice segue to the next sort of elements I wanted to cover, is that what are those opportunities that are arising for psychometrician in the context of, leveraging AI, generative AI and machine learning, considering that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, what AI can do, I see AI as a good partner. It frees us up on maybe the more mundane aspect of psychometrics. I think, thinking back when I was in graduate school, technical expertise is very much emphasized. You want to be the best of the best technically. You want to be the most accurate. You want to be the best person QC in code and, et cetera, et cetera. And I think some of that burden can be taken off by machine.
Yeah.
You know, AI is very good if you give it right data, right training. It's very good to do things in detail, repetitive tasks, maybe, you know, not the most inspiring for people, for humans to keep doing. So I think, you know, we can kind of offload some of that to machine and elevate ourselves into more of the decision making, the influencing, thinking big picture. How do we innovate? How can we do things differently? Think about the customer. So things like that I don't think is emphasized enough in education training for psychometricians today. So maybe there is also a need for a shift in the education curriculum in, you know, how we train our future psychometricians.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's a very valid point. And I think there's a role to play when we think about, for instance, ATP with the Learning Academy and elements like that. I think there's a massive opportunity, or other organizations, to really create that curriculum, building sort of those learning, evolving in terms of what's needed for the psychometricians. And I guess maybe, if you don't mind, I'm interested, like, how do you see that play with your teams, you know, in terms of how are you sort of like providing opportunities or elevating them to really be able to shift and adapt to some of those changes?
Yeah, so I think the importance of for psychometrician to be successful in a business setting is to be curious, to want to learn things that may not be directly related to psychometrics, you know, have an open mind and kind of seek out the big picture. You know, kind of like I said earlier in my example, if let's say we're starting a new testing program in a SAN and say, hey, you know, I want to learn more about the customer segment. I want to learn more about what problem we're trying to solve with this new product. What are we trying to do for this group of customer? You know, what will be their goal? Like, why would they want to buy from us? And kind of learning all of those contexts, I think, will help psychometricians make better decisions. And, you know, because I feel like we're very much involved in the design of the product and the development of the product. And if we don't have the big picture on, you know, what is it for at the end of the day, that will be very difficult to make decisions that are impactful.
Absolutely. And I think being able, like for you in your role, I would say even for me in my role, coaching and sort of like getting those opportunities, like flagging those opportunities to the people that are on our teams, working with them to get them to expand on that horizon, I think is really, really important. So.
Yeah. And I also like very much encourage mentoring among our team members, because you know, a more senior team member can mentor someone that is more junior or someone that is, you know, coming from a different perspective. I think both the mentor and the mentee will learn a lot through this mentoring process, and, you know, just teaching each other how to do certain things and challenging each other. So I think like that aspect of teamwork is very important.
Oh yeah, it's a win-win proposition, that's for sure. As we think about, again, the evolution of the test development process of how we build assessments in the age of AI, can you talk to us a little bit about your perspective around the changing role of the subject matter experts in test development as we're moving towards possibly more AI-driven solutions? How is it impacting the involvement of the SMEs?
Yeah, so SME, you know, in the old days, all questions are written from scratch by SME with subject matter experts, right? But now with generative AI and smarter specific LLMs for healthcare or whatever discipline that you're working in, you know, it probably make more sense for the generative AI to write the first draft of a question, you know, if you train the algorithm well. So I think the SME's role is now elevated as coaches and reviewers rather than someone that is doing all the work from scratch. And so I think, you know, in a way, it takes human up to a higher level. It frees us up from, you know, some of the things that are maybe repetitive and mundane, and doing things that uniquely only we can do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think capitalizing on their skills, you know, and it's different, but in a way, and I know in my experience throughout the years is that oftentimes people are are typically better at reviewing than they are at the initial creations, you
Yes.
know? So now we're just kind of redirecting and sort of focusing on the tasks that kind of maximizes their skill set in a way.
Yeah,
So,
because AI, from in a nursing example, however well you train your LLM and the data you put in, the generative AI will never have the experience that and the human nurse would have. The generative AI will never be able to experience what it feels like to sit with a patient at the bedside, holding their hands, crying with them, or helping their family through a difficult situation.
yeah.
Those are things that I think is uniquely human. If you're a practitioner, you have those experience and you can infuse that in your clinical scenarios that you're writing, or a test questions, and that will not be something that the AI can do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I read a quote, and I apologize because I don't have the exact source, but the quote was, as the evolution of the workforce and the skill sets on the workforce. So in the 20s and 50s, 1920s and 50s, it was all about muscles. And then it evolved and it became more about the brain. And now it's kind of like with the age of AI and all of that, it's becoming more about the heart. And I thought that was very powerful.
Wow,
And
that is a good quote.
yeah. And I have to find it to kind of be able to quote it appropriately. But I think that what you said, it reflects that, like it's an example of that exactly.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people fear AI, folks see AI as a competition. I think AI is nowhere near what a human can do. Like, we shouldn't view it as a competition. It's a
tool.
It's an assistant.
Yeah.
It's a tool. It's a tool that can help us to do work that, maybe at a speed that we couldn't do before, or at a volume that we couldn't do before, and elevate us to do something higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. We would be remiss not to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and some of those considerations around, leveraging AI and all that. So when we think about the psychometricians, how can they, and in general in the assessment industry, how can we ensure that AI solutions are designed with D&I principles in mind?
So I think, I might take a different route in answering this question.
That is fine.
I think we need to start with getting a more diverse group of psychometricians, or a more diverse group of interested students in the pipeline. So we have a more diverse group of working psychometricians that are in the operational side and the business side and leadership role. Because I think with the LLM and AI, and it's only as good as the training data set that we give it.
Yeah.
And we all have our own biases. I do, you do. We have very specific background that teaches us to be the way that we are. So I think the more diversity you can bring to the table at every step of the development process of AI or any kind of tool is going to help the outcome being more diverse. If there's only the same group of people doing everything, and it's the same group of very homogenous people, we're just using AI to perpetuate whatever's going on in society to
Absolutely.
make it bigger.
We just kind of continue that circle. I think it's really important what you just said. It starts, it's not with the tool itself, but it starts with who. Like, who do we have in place? And that's what we need to really address to really help us throughout. And then in the end, the key outputs then should be reflective of what we need to see. But it's work in progress, I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I think that, we see just from, the last 20 years that I have been in the profession, I have seen a shift of female leadership is being much more prominent. We're seeing more female psychometricians in all levels of the industry. So I think, we're seeing more formerly underrepresented group in, all levels of the industry. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely helpful, and then it's going to help us continue to look at, from a DEI standpoint, addressing the key consideration, the concerns. But it's something that is always top of mind and needs to stay top of mind. standpoint. So yeah, no, I agree. Looking ahead, what do you think really the future holds for psychometricians in this AI-driven landscape? So, what do you think are the skill strategies that are really critical for their success?
I think with decision making, think about how to develop critical thinking skill, decision making skill, and also some business communication skill on how to influence your peer, influence folks from other departments that maybe in the decision making capacity. Because the way that I see AI is only as good as the training data you provided, and the training data will never be perfect. There will be gaps, there will be things that are missing, there will be things that are wrong. And when that happens, at certain circumstances, the AI will have to take a guess. We'll have to figure out, using whatever algorithm the AI is taught to do to make a decisions. And those decisions might be wrong. It might be senseless. And I think that's where the human value comes in to say, hey, this makes no sense. This is dumb. This is counter to what I needed to do. And I think those decision making and the ability to spot it and the ability to pivot and, prevent those kinds of damage and also explain it to our cross-functional partners, I think that will be super important.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets us into as well when we think from a business standpoint, from a commercial standpoint, back to some of the earlier aspect of our conversation. It kind of lines up well with that too. It's not only about technology and AI, but it's all of the other skills, communication, critical thinking, business savviness that can help evolve and create those opportunities for the psychometricians to evolve in their role and building the value there. One thing that I wanted to also mention, I think that's also important when we think along those lines, again, from a psychometric standpoint for the psychometricians, as they are thinking about the broader landscape and picture around technology and business related. One thing that I'm passionate about, and I know you're passionate about as well, is getting engaged with the industry. And I think that's another way for psychometricians to really expand on their skill sets is, working, being part of different committees, whether it's with, ATP or ICE or other industry organizations, NCME, so on and so forth. Maybe if you don't mind, I want to hear a little bit about, from your perspective, what you think, because you're extremely engaged with the industry, and that has contributed to your continued, evolution and growth as part of the industry. How do you see that being definitely being an advantage and something critical when you think about the development of psychometricians?
Yeah, I think that is super important. I mean, from a more altruistic standpoint, it's like, you're paying it back, you are paying it forward, you're helping the industry. But, I see it also from a very selfish perspective. There are only so many jobs that I can do. There are only so many programs that I can get intimately involved with to really understand. And talking to other psychometricians that work in other sectors of the industry, it gives me a glimpse of what those other things are. It gives me some understanding. And, I think everybody is teaching me a lot every time I go to these conferences. And also the sense of fellowship, knowing that there are other people that care about the things that you care about, that have the same goals that you have, that, know the same relatively esoteric knowledge that you do. I think that also kind of help build a sense of community and a sense of being a profession. And, that's also in itself is very motivating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would be remiss not to call out and congratulate you, because I know you're the ATP 2025 appointed board chair. So I think that's exciting to see, again, how you've been so engaged, and now being able to have that type of position and being able to work from an industry standpoint, bring your perspective, your influence in a role like ATP board chair, I think is super exciting and important.
I'm very humbled and excited about the opportunity. And, I'm excited about how the ATP membership can kind of drive changes and move the industry forward in the coming years.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm very, very happy for you and excited. So it's been a very enlightening conversation, and I really appreciate your perspective and your time. As we wrap up, what would be sort of like final thoughts or advice that you would have for the people listening to this podcast in terms of embracing changes in an ever evolving field?
I think for psychometricians, when I start going to conference when I was in graduate school, there's always the joke of, I don't like to deal with people. That's why I am in psychometrics. I think, that's funny because some of it is true. I think in the world of AI and, for psychometric being more integrated with business decisions, try to talk to people, have an open mind and, be able to learn from each other. Because I think, your peers and other people in your profession, they will be your ally as you move forward in your career.
Yeah.
So try to go and make some friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we kind of need to kind of like push that stereotype in the way is that, there's very much different types of psychometricians and personalities and people. And the role has been evolving significantly. So it's kind of like pushing the limits there from that perspective and thinking about the psychometricians in a much different way. So I appreciate that. Good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and we'll keep it going in terms of like all of the opportunities and initiatives. And good luck with everything ahead of you with the E-ATP conference and what's coming up with ATP and other of your initiatives.
Thank you very much, Isabelle.
Thank you.